All right, now, so you had a question about the exam setup?
Yeah, like for like some of the question like the fracture destiny thing, do you give us the table or like we supposed to like print out
Oh,
cheat sheet?
no. So anything that is object specific. So there are some constants, universal constants that should be put onto your sheet. That's something I'm not going to give you. So things like, um, let's. I'm trying to think of something from this unit that would matter. Maybe the density of no. I was going to say density of water, but I think I probably would still give that. Maybe it's in the next unit. Yeah. So in the fluids unit, I probably wouldn't give you atmospheric pressure because that's something that is universal because it's literally atmospheric pressure. But when it comes to things like specifics of densities of materials, fracture limits of materials, the all those modules and all those uh, anything that is material specific, I will give that to you because I don't want you wasting a whole lot of space on your cheat sheet dedicated to something that only one of those objects might appear. You know what I mean? So that stuff I will give it to you. If I don't give it to you on the test, that usually means that either you don't need it or I might have forgotten, in which case just send me a message real quick and I'll try to get back to you as quickly as I can. And then you'll just, once you get my message, you can continue on with that question. But most likely, I vetted these questions. There shouldn't be any mistakes. So anything that you need is given to you, except for things like universal constants.
Okay, thank you.
Any other questions? Yes, you.
I want to ask, how strict are the significant digits in this class?
Not strict at all. I would say the only thing is you'd probably need to make sure you have at least two or three just for uniqueness sake. If there's a number that's, let's say you calculate it and it's 1,385. Um, if you round it to 1,000, that's way too off. Uh, Rounding it to 1,400 is probably, that's fine. I'd probably let you slide with that. But I would say, keeping it to three sig figs or so is pretty much where you'd want to be. But if you gave me more, I'm not gonna, nitpick it.
All right, thank you.
Yeah, this isn't like chemistry where I'm gonna hit you hard for sig figs. Like I said, as long as you have enough for me to be able to say, I'd be able to look at your number and say, oh yeah, that's correct. Yes, mine.
Was wondering if I know that there was a practice exam posted. I was wondering because I haven't taken it yet because I didn't know if I could take it like multiple times. If that was just like for us to get used to the format or if it was like a mock exam, like a practice exam for our first midterm.
Sort of both. So it has the question. So there is a little bit of a issue with the practice exam, but I posted it mainly for you to have experience with the process of opening it up um, into Blackboard. I guess seeing how it will auto close by itself, and then having practice submitting work in through Google Classroom. I'm not looking at that work, by the way. It's just, again, practice uploading it so that you kind of get the feel for how to do it fairly quickly. Uh, it's also a mock for how I guess you could say the difficulty of the questions or the way some of the questions might be set up, though it's not fully up to date with my style, and I'll explain that in a second. But there, it is also a mock in that sense. So it's kind of a mock in two different ways, if that
Okay,
answers your
perfect.
question.
Yeah,
Now,
thank you so much.
no problem. Now, I did want to clarify a little bit because I said that it's not really the best. What I mean by that is, if you look at the practice midterm, oh, did I actually? Ooh. Okay, so let me see one of the questions. So I didn't realize I actually updated it. Is it practice one then? Oh yeah, okay. So practice one. You may notice that if you look at practice one versus practice two, um, the way some of the questions are set up are slightly different. Practice one is how I used to ask my questions, very old school, where a lot of questions were very vague and open, where there was a lot of points to it because there was a lot of work that you'd have to do. That is something I don't do. Like, for example, there's not going to be a single question by itself that's going to be 10 points. Most of the questions are going to be look a lot more closer to practice two, uh, which that's what it was. I took practice one and I reformatted it the way I would have written it as a more modern test, where I broke up the parts into like a part A, B, and C, where it kind of leads you to the next part. So, for example, if you look at practice one, question two, it asks, there's a scuba diver. It says all this stuff, and then it just asks what volume must be added to the lift bag to bring the cannon to the surface. There's a lot of parts to that. There's like 5 different equations that I have to use and different steps that you have to take, which is why I gave it a total of 10 points. But if you look at practice two, that exact same question is now broken up into parts where the final or part C asks the same thing, but because A and B kind of act as intermediate steps, it becomes a lot more manageable and a lot easier to approach. So I would say that if you were able to look at practice one and do that no problems, fairly easy without having to look at anything and actually staying within a 1.5 hour type of time frame, then you should be pretty golden. But if you felt like that seemed pretty tough, then check out practice two because that's more of the style of the way the questions are asked. One thing I actually want to remind everyone was that this practice test is actually the a practice for both test one and test two. So the questions one and two are going to be pretty much test one, and then if you want to look at questions three and four later on, that's going to be test two. So that's similar question styles. Again, it might not be these exact steps, but for example, if you look at question one, that's strictly the first chapter, chapter 12. Question two is straight from chapter 13, where it's all fluids. But then when you look at questions three and four, you can see how it's a little amalgamation from everything between chapters 14, 15, and 16. Because, like I said, all those are pretty much very interconnected, and it's kind of hard to ask a pure question from a sound perspective without also covering waves or covering waves without covering harmonic motion. Yes, awesome.
So when you say like the questions 1 and 2 are for the first test, you mean like part A, part B thing? Like the 3 and 4 is like part B of the test one? Is that what you mean by that?
No. So like as I said, I took the midterm and I split it in half. So the first 2 questions on my midterm became test one, and the second 2 questions went to test two. So
Oh, okay.
this is a practice midterm, which means it's incorporating both test one and test two. I know it seems really confusing. I'm keeping it this way only because of the fact that eventually we're going to be physical, not this year but next year. So I didn't
Yeah,
want to, you know, change everything just for something that's going to be rectified in a year or two.
gotcha. Thank you.
No problem.
Like for the homework
Yes.
or like for submission to Google Classroom, right? Do we have to put out like a net ID and then SBU ID on the paper to let us know which?
No, not really. Most likely you probably signed in with your school account or something. and your name should be linked to your account. So once you submit the work, I should be able to see it through your account. I don't really need to see your name. I mean, you could write your name, but I don't need to see like all that header information.
Okay. Alright.
I guess one thing I would say is make sure that you actually submit it in the right section. It gets a little confusing which tests some people are, which homeworks people are submitting sometimes, because some people like to try to get ahead of the curve, which is perfectly fine. But it gets a little confusing because they sometimes accidentally put in the wrong one, and I can never keep track.